Well, I like what you said about how when you watch Drifter, you see that's who you were at that time, and maybe whether it makes you uncomfortable or not, you see who you were and what you were going through, what you were trying to intend the audience to feel. And you hear it with bands like let's say U2. Their first two albums, very angry, excellent albums, but different from newer ones where, you know, life is maybe a little better, money's more plentiful. So I think people are in a different state of mind.
Yeah.
But I get it. I was watching this talk show with Wes Craven, and I think it was from like 1988.
Oh my God.
And it had some of the commercials still playing from that time. And this was from like a talk show that I watched as a little girl. And I was like, wow, even the tone of the commercials were more upbeat. The music, everything was different. So the tonality of the world was different then.
Yeah.
So I think we reflect what, you know, and if you're saying 2015, people have come out of the recession.
Yeah.
It was a tough time for everybody, especially millennials, because jobs were not what, you know, it was a tough time for everybody.
Yeah.
So I get that you could have felt that. It was an angry time for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was just like really attracted to you know, exposing just like the ugliness of humanity and just like the flip side of things, you know, like sort of Bret Easton Ellis, kind of like, you know, I mean, how he would, like when he wrote like Rules of Attraction and American Psycho and all these, like, he was much more attracted to like the flaws in people. And I think and I'm, you know, I think the one thing that I'm very attracted to is very kind of like a common thing that no matter how mainstream I would want to dabble in, like I am very interested in like very flawed people and like very flawed characters against even more flawed characters, and sort of like kind of like, you know, somewhat cynical outlook on the world, but like in a fun, exciting way, like not like in a, you know, in a kind of like a witty, entertaining kind of way, but I think I'm getting better about approaching it and doing the same kind of intention, but doing it a little bit more, I mean, lighter is not the best kind of word, just a little bit more like audience friendly, but still having that same kind of outlook, you know, because I don't want to lose that kind of outlook, because I think that's what makes you know, my stuff kind of like, you know, specific, but just doing it a little bit more like, you know, a little bit more something that like maybe my mom would enjoy, you know. I mean, Drifter's not her kind of movie, like she's not her kind of movie, you know. But you know,
with Drifter, I'm not sure if you're able to talk about the budget and some of that, but I was curious about how you did the location scouting, because you talked about the desert, and how you were very intrigued by the desert. And I know the desert's always intrigued me. That there's something frightening about it, and then there's something very mysterious and ethereal about it, because you could kind of get lost in there. And there's all these sort of interesting drifters, and you know, there really are. I mean, and you kind of wonder what their background is. So what is it about the desert, and how did you find that location?
Well, I just like the budget thing. Well, we shot the movie for like 40,000. Like it was like under 50 grand. So like, but we shot a lot of. I shot a couple shorts like in Lancaster area and Palmdale. Like, so I kind of like was a little familiar with that area. And Drifter was sort of like the first time to really embrace my like fascination with the desert, because I've been really fascinated by it for a couple of years, and because I love stories about isolation. And yeah, I mean, like it was just like, you know, just getting old before your time and just like burning so much gas money, just driving out to the outskirts of, because, you know, there was no location manager or anything. There was like, you know, it was very skeleton crew, like the bare bones operation with the movie, and like, and just drive, but the kicking off point was like my cinematographer had known about the town, like that was in Bombay Beach, and you know, which, you know, like the Bad Batch, the movie with Keanu Reeves, shot there a couple years ago. Like they had wrapped filming a few months before we arrived. So they had, but I think mostly they do like photo shoots and commercials there, and they don't do that many features. Maybe they're starting to, but we, you know, like that was like, you know, like that was the kicking off point to write a script around access to that town, and then just driving around all over the place trying to find. It was actually really, since there was no location manager, and that movie was so, it was so much. That movie is so much driven by the set pieces that like the locations they were paramount in that story, and like if the locations just didn't fit, and that movie was going to get laughed off the screen. And like, and I've seen a lot of like really low budget post-apocalyptic or micro budget post-apocalyptic stories, and like shooting in like Vasquez Rocks and like Valencia. It's like, I mean, we see like tourists in the back, you know, it's like, I want to shoot at places that like no one shoots at, you know, like hit like forbidden places almost. And
Devil's Punch Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, like I love that stuff. You know, I mean, I wanted to go all the way to like Death Valley, but it was way too far. And, but I mean, yeah, I mean, just like finding all these like different places. And yeah, I mean, we were in pre-production for a long time, because I just like, there was like, you know, very, very small, you know, crew. So it's like I needed time to get all that stuff, you know, and the locations were like the major thing that was probably the most like, because you know, you don't want to break the bank, but you want to make sure the locations are as cinematic as you can get. So it was like a lot of like, you know, negotiating and shooting, you know, in random spots all over the place, but yeah, it was mainly, yeah, it was like all around like Lancaster, Joshua Tree, Bombay Beach, Victorville, like all those. And we shot a little in LA and like shot like inside this like haunted house, which was oddly enough like right around the corner where I lived. It was like I've been trying to find that location for like forever, and like I'd gone to all these houses that were like they were like they like, you know, they're just normal houses, you know, and they was not at all like I was trying to look for like a haunted kind of manor, like the Tales from the Crypt kind of house or something, you know, like, and you know, and I was shocked that we were able to get the house that we got, because the guy was just like a super nice guy and just totally hooked us up with a great deal on it, and it was just like when I saw that house, I was like, because I just get so obsessive. I love locations, and I love like the bigger the better, and like, and I like seeing that house, I was like, and the fact that it was right around the corner, like right under my nose this entire time, for like months I was trying to find that place, and when I saw this place, I was like, it has literally everything we needed. All the rooms, like they had extra furniture. I mean, like literally everything we needed was there. It was like, it was almost like it was very odd. It was like destiny. It was really, really great. But yeah, I mean, the locations, that's like one of the major, like that's like one of the major things that I'm very, very like stubborn about in pre-production, because, you know, it dictates the quality of the movie. And like, and if I've seen films with like really like crappy locations, and they're just like, why would you ever use that? And so I think, you know, I mean, you don't want to be like, you got to be, you know, realistic at a certain point. But you know, you don't. I think there's a difference between being realistic and like settling. Like you don't want to like I mean, you really want to make sure that you can get like the best location you can possibly get. I mean, like I think a lot of people just sort of like, nah, it's fine. Let's just shoot there. It's totally cool. We'll just shoot around it. And like, you know, locations are so important. So important. I mean, if you're making a cinematic kind of story, it's like they're very, very important, because it's just like, you know, I mean, it just dictates so many things, you know.
How did you deal with the wind and the heat? And also too, I don't know how close were any types of stores or whatever, like, so how are you dealing with the remote location and some of the elements?
I mean, like, we shot we shot like 2 filming blocks in July and August of 2015. In July, we were shooting a lot of night stuff in Lancaster and Victorville area, and it was like freezing. Yeah, it was we had this like one girl that was like, she was like covered in fake blood for like hours that night, and she was just like shivering the entire, like her teeth were chattering the entire time. It was like, it was rough, but like, but yeah, I mean, but that was nothing compared to when we shot in the town, because the film commission, I remember like meeting with them, they were like laughing at us because we were shooting in August. Like they were like, even that movie, like even that that other movie I was talking about, like they filmed in like April, like, and even then it's hot out there, and it doesn't start to cool until October, and we couldn't push to October. I just wasn't going to be one of these guys that like shoots, you know, on the weekend, then months later shoots again. I just too impatient for that, so yeah, I mean, we shot like in the thick of the August, like literally the worst time that you're supposed to be filming there, and I remember there was like, we were so cautious if we could like afford a medic to come out, because we needed a medic to come out, but we were nervous about if we could afford. And then we finally did get one to come out, and there were a couple people that almost like there were a couple moments that people almost passed out, and like it was just I mean, like it was just very intense. It was like I had never felt heat like that before. I mean, I remember when we first arrived, everyone was like having a great time, like driving out there, and then like the moment we first arrived, people like couldn't breathe when they stepped out of the car. And because like the moment we arrived, we went right into filming, and like people were just like already like feeling it, and we had like 4 much more ambitious days after that. So it was like, I think the hottest it got was probably 120, I think, like, and it was like the biggest day too, that it was like the hottest day as well. It was the most ambitious day, and like, but I think, you know, looking back at it, I think it really dictated like people's performances. Like I think it really, the freezing cold and the scorching heat, I think that really influence people's performances, because they really like all that sweat's all real. I mean, all that, you know, I mean, just all like the sunburn and all that stuff's real. And so I mean, like that's, you know, because I just love the stories of like the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, how it was like scorching heat and just like such a nasty atmosphere and world that they were filming, or locations they were filming in, so like kind of like you don't want to touch anything, but it just like you look at the film and it's like, yeah, it lends itself very well to it, you know. But yeah.